yourself, please? Mute yourself, please, because we hear there's some background noise. Thanks. With me this evening, I'm Bob Kelly, the chair of the committee. With me this evening are Ben Mosher and Carl Wickstrom, longtime members of the committee, and new member Alan Mangan. The four of us, with select person Molly Cowan, form the Exeter Water and Sewer Advisory Committee. And I think Molly may be zooming in.
I'm here.
Hi, Molly. Thanks for weighing in.
I think we actually have a quorum without Molly, don't we?
We do, which we do with.
Still glad to have you, Molly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl.
So what I will do, and we're going to start off with the abatements, and we'll take them in the order with which they were received. Let me just actually find out who's the other gentleman who was holding. Are you still there?
Yeah, sorry, and I tried to put myself on this with Bluetooth so that the kids.
There we go. What's your address?
It's 24 and 26 Washington.
Oh, okay, excellent. So we'll take you first. First of all, since you're zooming in, I need to have you identify yourself, your name for the record, and then also if there are any other folks in the room with you, we just need to identify that to comply with state law.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm Pat Driscoll. I live in, I don't live in Exeter, I live in Rye, New Hampshire, but the property is 2426 Washington Street in Exeter. And unless some kids come barging through that door right there, I'm the only one in the room.
Well, we got the information on your request. I guess need a little bit more background information, because in the write-up I'm assuming that you wrote in on this?
Yes, myself and Chris, who works on my team, put this together.
Because it talks about that you were estimating there was roughly a 5-day gap between when the leak was noticed and when the water was shut off and the repairs were made. But the amounts.
That's not what it says. Sorry.
Oh.
What it says was it was roughly 5 days before it was noticed, and then it was shut off immediately. But it went they think it went for 5 days before it was.
I guess that's what I meant.
Oh, well, that's not exactly.
That's not what I said.
No.
You're right. But at any rate, it appears like it was leaking for about 5 days. Am I to understand that to be correct? And then you shut it off immediately.
You got it.
I'm just going through and feel free, anyone else on the committee, to jump in. But if my calculation, you were averaging about 40,000 gallons per quarter prior to that. And then this usage was 127,000 gallons for the quarter. Yeah. So if that's somewhere around an 85,000 gallon delta divided by 90 days is a lot more than it's a lot more than 5 days.
What's the size of the pipe?
Yeah, so it's a inch and a half pipe that's in through there. So let me, it's a unusual situation. So if you don't mind, I'll kind of give you some background on the property that might help out with it. So I bought the property with my wife in 2008. 24 and 26. The reason why there are two addresses on there is that it's a old New England style home in the front, and then there's another single family home in the back. So the single family home is 24. The old New England style home, which has now been changed into 4 one-bedroom units, is 26. That's in the front. We didn't alter any of the living areas. We bought it in 08 and fixed it up, but there were 4 units in the front and that standalone unit in the back that my wife and I lived in for 4 years at that time, from 2008 until 2012. But what happens is, and this was done before us, is the water gets run through 26 and then is run from there through that large diameter pipe over to 24. So that gets run on the exterior, kind of, I mean, I knew it was on the exterior, I didn't know how it was run, but it actually burst. It was the black, I'm not sure what it's called, my plumber certainly did. It was a black pipe that ended up getting a crack. So what happened was it flooded underground on the exterior of the foundation of the New England style home, and then started to run into the old brick and fieldstone foundation of 26 and into the basement that is rarely accessed. So I had found it. I'm estimating 5 days because I was in there about 7 days prior. So just based off of who was there and what was going on, I figured that it was about 5 days of it running full through that large diameter pipe before I noticed it.
Go ahead, Carl.
You said it was black pipe. Was it iron, or was it metal, or was it plastic?
No, it was a poly.
Okay.
It looked to be like a 19 late 80s, early 90s pipe. I'm a carpenter, so I run into it all the time. I don't know the terminology for it, but my plumber seemed to say, "Oh yeah."
I think it's polypropylene.
This makes sense.
Probably is. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, again, going back to the calculation, because if you take 40,000 gallons for a quarter, which, you know, some of the usage has been much less than that, but on average in the last year or so, it's been about that. You divide that by 90 days, it's a little bit about 440 gallons per day average.
Yep.
And so then the delta, you know, according to your abatement request, the last period you used 127,000 gallons. So if you subtract 40 from that, it's around, you know, 80 to 85,000 gallons. If you divide that by 444, which is your average usage prior to that, it's more like 200 days, not 5.
Right.
So
I can tell you, it definitely wasn't 200 days before it came into the foundation, and just from knowing what it was, I was
astounded by what that water bill was. And it timed out perfectly with this pipe break. It's not like we've owned the home for 2 years. We've owned the home for 14 or 15 years. And you'll see the consistency with it. It's not like we have different tenants in there that are, I don't know, running some sort of water filling business on the side. So I just made the quick correlation that it was that water pipe that was running. And granted, not all of that water is going to run into the basement, right? It's going to saturate that entire area underground. But
is the basement a concrete basement, a full basement?
No, it's an 1890s basement, so it's brick on the top with fieldstone on the sides, and it has a poured slab at some point was put in there.
So how'd the water leave the basement? Is there a drain?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So there's a pump on the front side of it. Once again, it was existing.
Where does that pump to? Does it pump outside? Does it pump into?
Yeah, it pumps outside.
Into the storm drain?
You got it.
Okay, not into the sanitary sewer.
It doesn't go into the sewer. You put it in. You just ran it out to a catch basin.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all pre-existing.
I have a look.
I know, it's just
looks to me like it goes to a separate pipe that goes into the storm. Into the storm drain.
Okay. Any comments or observations?
Well, none of that water actually went into the sewer.
Correct.
So
It does not appear.
that if we want to give us if we want to give any consideration for the fact that there's no more load put on the sewer than normal, we might consider that. The other thing, of course, is certainly he's got to have some responsibility for it.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't be
100%.
I would agree. I mean, typically in this kind of case, unfortunately, most of the cases we're looking at 5/8 pipe, not or 3/4 at the most, not 1.5 inch. So
Yeah,
there's quite a bit, but it does appear like it was an accidental discharge. I don't know why they don't give us
I know the way they do it.
the numbers for.
I can calculate it out if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
I would like to calculate, what I would recommend, and I'll calculate the number.
Sure.
But it would be the full abatement on the sewer and then 80% or 50%. Which do you think on the
I think 50%.
50% on the water portion and 100% on the sewer?
I mean, not that,
That makes sense to me.
you're not a plumber, and, most of us aren't plumbers, so you look at black pipe versus copper pipe, and, nobody really knows, to make a note of it, but it is still a homeowner responsibility to be aware of their utilities.
If I can chime in, and please cut me off if this is an inappropriate time for it, I will say, not only did we fix it, but we made sure that it was better in running that line continuously through the house so it doesn't happen again.
What type?
I understand there's a cost correlation of this, but there's also a tax on the system.
What type of pipe did you replace with?
We used a PEX pipe.
What kind? Sorry, didn't hear
We
you.
used the PEX, the blue PEX.
Oh, PEX, okay.
Yeah, we use a smaller diameter. As I'm sure you guys know, I don't need an 1.5-inch pipe to feed a one-family house. So we wanted to fix that problem right off the bat. And if you've driven past Washington Street, it's a great street. Some of the homes are improved and some of them aren't. Over the last 4 months, we've taken my time to fix up Washington Street. There's a direct correlation between how much money to fix up that house and what we get for an abatement here. So any money that I can get here is money that is going to continue to fix up with code compliant
How'd you get the number?
and everything else.
That's for what he has.
That's
to pay
just
or
the
for
water.
abatement?
That's 50% of the water. I took half excess water and sewer and subtracted half excess sewer. If the language is correct, then presumably what's left is half excess
I didn't do
water.
it that way, and I came up with a very different number. Half of excess water and sewer, and then subtracted half of sewer, and that's the number you got for just the water portion.
That's just the water.
Okay. All right.
Which doesn't-
Add that to that, the full abatement of the sewer, 1885.51.
Right.
And what number do you get? Is that,
3702.
that can't be right.
That can't be right.
Yeah, something there is wrong.
So something's wrong.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Well, why don't
I
we-
came up with 2366 for a full abatement of the excess sewer. This is the abatement amount.
I understand.
Full abatement of the excess sewer and 50% of the water. I got 2365, which is at least within the range. It's
Right.
one of the numbers.
But again, you would think that for a full abatement of the sewer, then it would be higher than the 2,800 half, because you're abating all of the sewer.
Abating all the sewer, but you're doing all the sewer.
So we'll have DPW.
Wait a minute.
Let's vote on we can vote
Let's
on
vote on what it is.
the concept.
By the way, one of their, no, that number's not right. That 280521 is not right. Because 80% of excess water and sewer is 2369.
Yeah.
Half of excess water cannot be more than 80%. So one of
Exactly.
these numbers are either flipped or those numbers aren't right.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. So we'll just say what we want to do and think that's.
So what we would generally do in a case like this, since the water did not go into the sewer, we would abate you a full abatement on the excess water, the excess sewer usage, because you didn't use the sewer. And that we would meet you halfway on the excess water usage. You would basically pay half of it, and the town would abate half of it.
I appreciate that. I'd appreciate 80% of the abatement on the water. I suppose.
Well, yeah, that's a tough one, just because the policy reads that the homeowner is responsible from the meter in 100%. And we've gotten in the habit in the last few years of trying to be a little bit less draconian, and accidents do happen, and in this case, clearly you took care of it, but it was an accident, and it is ultimately your responsibility. So we'll meet you halfway on the water and a full abatement on sewer. We'll calculate the exact number.
That's fine. I got 2,400 too. 24, 23.
Yeah, it appears like it'll be somewhere in the $2,400
That's the amount of abatement, not the
range.
bill.
That's the abatement. So there'll be some of the bill that you will still owe, but whatever that would be, it's, there'll be, and we'll get the exact information from Public Works, but
Okay.
it will be somewhere in that $2,400 range.
Okay.
So I will, do you want to make that motion, Carl?
Yeah, I make the motion that we have a 50% abatement on the excess water, 100% abatement on the excess sewer, which, with a number that should be checked, should be around $2,400, $2,423.66 abatement. That's my motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying, well, I have to go through a roll call since Molly is zoomed in. So Carl, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Molly, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. So Patrick, we'll be getting some information back to you, but we approved an abatement, as Carl indicated. It'll be somewhere around $2,400.
Okay. And you'll check those numbers again just to make sure that.
We will.
Well, the overriding one will be full abatement of excess sewer and 50% of the water.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry for the background noise.
Not a problem. Thanks for weighing in, and thanks for walking us through it.
Yeah, you bet. Have a good night.
Okay, take care.
Okay.
So also with us is Robert Smith.
You can call me Scott, by the way.
Scott?
Yeah, it's a middle name. It's a long story.
Yeah, I'm a middle name guy myself.
Yeah.
So he resides at 3 Drinkwater Road. So we'll look at that one next. So we have the write-up if you want to give just a general overview of your perspective on this.
Sure. We bought the house in March. We were in condo for 12 years over by where the old near the Green Bean, where the street is right now. And I thought I had cut off the spigot outside for the hose, and then we went away for Thanksgiving, came back Friday morning, discovered the very rather large flood in our basement, thought that something had burst inside the house, spent a lot of time looking for that, and then realized I heard some motion outside, and I went outside, and it was the hose had popped off, the kind of handle popped off, and had just been pouring out for however long the report says. And then cut that off immediately, went inside, shop vac everything, put it down the drain, and so fortunately there was very limited damage to the basement, but it was kind of a shock to come back to it.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, I'm sure you've learned this by now, but you should actually disconnect any hose.
I did immediately, we never had to deal with that at the condo, so
Right.
this is a new thing for me.
But even just hooked on there
Yeah.
without allowing the gravity to take it out of the spigot will be enough to make it have a rather major damage to your house.
My colleague says it's the kind of mistake you make once. Yeah. That's true. So I was like, absolutely. So yeah, thank you.
So
Thank you.
it says that it caused flooding in the basement, so how did that happen? So it was an outside hose, and then what came in through the foundation?
It must have, it was right outside kind of our corner of our foundation area. And we had a flood when it rained really hard. I think it was sometime in maybe August or July. We had a pretty good flood, and we got the gutters to move away from our house further and so on, which is smart. But it certainly did. And it was only about maybe an inch of water for about a third of the basement area. It was pretty easy to shop vac, but we had the people who redid it before we bought it had put a pretty nice coat of waterproof paint on the ground, so there wasn't a lot of damage for that.
So is there a drain in the basement?
There's not a drain in the basement.
So you had to remove the water all yourself?
I did, and then lots of fans. I drilled a hole in some of the baseboards to make sure that it didn't mold inside. But that's easily fixable and done. So
They're done now.
it was a fun day. Good Thanksgiving. Come back the day after, and all of a sudden, I had thought, as a new homeowner, I thought someone had pranked me and had cut the water on, but it was just my own fault.
This would seem to be a similar situation as the previous one, where there would be a full abatement on the excess sewer
I agree.
and a half abatement on
So we
the
have to do
water.
the math again.
Certainly discussed. What was it?
1478,
Oh, you did it. Good.
if I'm doing it right.
71478.
That's half water, full sewer.
You want me to check it, or are you confident?
You might want to.
Well,
Okay, any further discussion on the concept of abating half of the excess water and a full abatement on the excess sewer?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, I'll make a motion in that regard, if someone would second it for me.
I'll second.
Okay, so Carl votes aye. Ben, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, Helen?
Aye.
Molly, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Chair votes aye, so it passes 5-0.
And I'll confirm 71478 or
8.
7.
So we'll abate half the water and
That's very generous. I appreciate that. I really do, quite a bit.
you'll see that reflected on your next bill.
And I assume you'll allow me to take my leave, but.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You are not being held. You're not being detained.
I have to say I'm mildly interested in what's happened next. It's not that strong.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay.
It is all sorts of exciting.
My wife wants me to home, so I'm going to do it. Thanks a lot.
Lynn does too, but I'm staying anyway.
Thanks, Al.
Okay. So the next one's at 45 West Side Drive, James and Elizabeth Herrick. Seems fairly straightforward. They had a toilet that was running for several days, which is interesting. The toilet running for several days. I guess that the difference between a 1.5-inch pipe and a 5/8-inch pipe is pretty significant because their bill is quite a bit less than the one on Washington.
Those is the square of the area, as you
Yeah,
know.
pretty much.
Or the square of the diameter, sorry.
It doesn't seem like there's anything earth-shattering in their write-up. Pretty basic leaking toilet and
Yeah, they don't get the full abatement of the sewer, though.
correct. Typically in this case, we would consider a half abatement of the excess water and sewer, which in this case would be $198 $2,200.67. If there's a consensus on that, we'll certainly discuss accordingly.
Has that been the recent flapper policy? I know this is pretty much half our
Quite a bit.
issues we see, but
Most of the time, it's a flapper valve or something like that in the toilet. It was interesting to me. It's the other one that's, never mind. It wasn't this flapper valve, it was the other.
Well, the fact that I ran it for several days and they only incurred $200 worth of excess usage, or have, $300, $400 of excess fully usage is pretty amazing.
half sounds right. I just want to make sure that's consistent with recent.
Yeah, I think occasionally we have done 80%, but I think there were extenuating circumstances that are not here for this one.
Yeah, the next one I would agree is more extenuating, but this seems like just a basic part of the house, and they didn't.
I found it interesting. I hope it was going to be here because you look back at the quarterly usage, and it was interesting that it rose all the way up through the end of 2021 and then dropped down for the rest of 2022, then shot up, of course, during the leak.
Right.
I was just wondering if they was curious as to why that happened. So like maybe they had house guests towards the end of the year or something. It's just kind of, it's like twice the usage.
Well, and you can see that they used quite a bit more during, COVID.
Yeah, that's true.
9,000.
Yeah, that's true too. Maybe that's it. They're maybe just home more. That's
Right.
very, very possible. Yeah, that's probably good.
Okay, well, hear a motion for,
I'll make a motion to abate half of the water and half of the sewer.
I'll second that.
okay, motion's been moved and seconded to abate half of the excess water and sewer to the amount of $198.67. Carl, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Molly?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Passes 5-0. Okay, and the last one is 11 Colcord Pond Road. Again, it seems straightforward, except in this case, there seem to be some at-home issues that may, in the past, we have looked at a higher abatement rate.
I was a little confused a little bit from the water and sewer department assessment. They talked about the street crew was sent out and they repaired the toilet.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
not normal.
It says two guys. I don't know.
Well, that's what he said. That's what he said in his. But if you look down at the one from the water and sewer abatement, I assume that's coming from, it says water and sewer department assessment.
I mean, my guess is that repaired means they fixed a flapper.
Yeah, it's just,
That would be my guess.
I mean, I'm sure it's really nice of them to do that.
It
We
is
don't
very-
normally do that.
Yeah, it's surprising that they went in the house and they did that.
Yeah,
You're right.
they usually
it looks
say,
like they
this is
fixed it."
broken, go fix it. They don't usually actually try to fix it.
Right.
That was nice of them to do. I'm just
it was
surprised.
a little bit of liability.
It tells me a little bit, though, about it says fixed income, but, maybe they could tell they needed the help. That's what I'm thinking.
Right, they were like somewhat sort of confused or whatever, and the guys were nice enough to help
Right,
out, which is great.
But I agree.
Which is great. So, again, not
Kudos.
standard operating procedure, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, we just don't, the only problem would be a precedent being set or something.
right.
People are going to
Yeah,
expect you to come inside their house and repair
We
the
don't want
leaks.
that.
We don't want that. That's the only thought.
So, in the past, we have considered for a special case, either infirmity or just not being able to, sort of get to the piping or to the leak. For one reason or another, we've considered an 80% abatement as opposed to a 50% to assist in
I
that.
agree with this. I don't know.
I support that.
Just a feeling, a gut feeling that this is.
It seems like the information
Well, I mean,
goes in that direction.
you go back and you look at it, it's like it's been leaking over several months.
Right.
It's intermittent. It's an intermittent leak because the flapper valve would seat properly one time and did not seat properly the next time.
That was my impression.
That's what I'm thinking is going.
So hopefully, they get a once in 10 year abatement. So this is sort of their shot. So hopefully, they figured out to at least listen for it, if nothing else.
Yeah, right. And that's what I think has happened is that it's a flapper valve being what a flapper valve is. If it's worn, it can not seat properly sometimes and seat properly other times. So you don't always. And of course, it's intermittent in the sense that it only fills when the tank gets down below the float valve. So it doesn't run all the time. So I can understand how that would. I guess that's one of the feelings I have. Maybe this should be an 80%. Trying to justify that.
So I will entertain a motion
I
for
would make the motion that we have an 80% abatement in this case.
I will second that.
Thank you. Further discussion? So the amount will be $320.81. Carl, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Ben? Alan?
Aye.
Molly?
I.
And the chair votes aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. The finance folks sent over the financial reports. Does anybody have any questions on that? As we've discussed in the past, cash flow is very intermittent. There are 3 districts in town, and they are billed accordingly, and then there's obviously a 30-day after the billing. So if you use water at the beginning of that quarter, it's sometimes 4 to 5 months before we actually get the water for it or the money for it. So, and in the case of the sewer fund, to refresh everyone's memory, we have that big bond payment of about $4 million at the end of the year for the new wastewater plant that we built in 19. So that's why that fund tends to be a little higher than the water fund.
I can't remember. That's a one-time $4 million, or is it every year?
It's every year.
Okay.
For the next, at this point, 16 years.
Okay.
And we've done pretty well. We haven't, we'll probably have to, well, I'll be talking about this in a minute, but we haven't adjusted rates for over a year. We were able to sort of pick the sweet spot, previously, so that they weren't too onerous, but we were still able to meet our obligations. So we're in pretty good shape that way. So what I will do, operations, on the operations report, I don't know if you guys have heard scuttlebutt around town, but the siphons that we reviewed about a year or so ago, they ran into some slight issues in the construction. They ran into ledge, actually, ironically enough, right near the river. Who knew?
Okay.
So there were some significant, changes in the project. Significant change orders and delays as they deal with removing that ledge. Luckily, we did get. Was it just ARPA money, Molly? Do you recall, or did we get some federal money for that project?
We got some congressionally directed spending from Happus's office for that.
Okay, and that was what was that? $600,000?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact. It was quite a bit, though.
It was quite a bit.
Yeah. So if you recall, through our deliberations, we picked, it wasn't the most expensive, it wasn't the cheapest, it was in the middle, but it looked like it would be the most effective for going forward 50 years. There were some delays in getting the contract let, and then they ran into this, but it appears like there's no additional spending that or requests made of the town. What we approved 2 years ago is still the amount, and then whatever the feds have kicked in.
So I think it was like 1.1 million
Right.
from the town.
Right.
There's still
And this will be
the town's part.
Yes, and I mean, We're hoping that the congressional money will sort of cover this overage. We'll see how it goes. But
So, do you know the details of how they handle that ledge
I don't.
issue? I mean, is the issue that I don't even know what the issue of the ledge being there is. I mean, is it because they have to cut through the ledge, or is it?
yes, I think there's a trench. That was we were going to replace 2 siphons
Right.
with 3
Right.
For the capacity, and I think along the route. Because the siphons are relatively old, the expanded, laterally route that we were looking at had, it's one of those things, I think, that nobody really even thought to do borings because it was through the river. And, nobody, figured that would be an issue. So with the expanded trench, if you will, for the wider trench, wider surface area going across the river, we ran into some ledge. Is what the Public Works folks have told me.
And how do they get that out of there with a?
I'm not sure. I think they're still.
Underwater jackhammer.
If you walk Swayze Park at all, you'll see there hasn't been much work done
Seen the pipe
in several months. So I think there's a lot of chin scratching and head scratching at this point to figure out how to deal with it. But,
So meanwhile,
Just leaving the door open because I think they're supposed to be left open for the meetings.
oh, okay. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
do
So-
we have an issue? How well is the old holding up in the meantime? I guess is one.
I mean, I think it's holding its own. I think everybody realizes that it needs to be replaced. I think
The worst thing that would happen is we had to do some kind of emergency.
yeah, but that has not been the case so far.
What was the final plan? Two barrels? Or
3.
We went with all 3?
3.
You can see them laying out there
I
along the
haven't been
street.
down there.
Yeah, we were looking at slip lining them, and we thought that the reduction of capacity would not be worthwhile. And then we looked at replacing the 2 in kind, and then adding a 3rd one, for capacity, because the hospital's changing their approach, and then there's some developments on the Portsmouth Ave side of the river that are going to require larger capacity going across the river. So.
Couldn't remember.
Okay, so a couple of new projects that I want to introduce quickly. Well, not a lot of information at this point, but probably at our next meeting, if not a meeting during the summer, we'll be discussing them, and I think being asked to weigh in. The first would be a new rate study. We did a rate, the last rate analysis we did was in 2015 into 2016. It was sort of completed at the end of 2016, and then that model became a basis for our rates for water and sewer usage and impact fees, since that time. There was the rates have worked pretty well since that time, but the town manager and at the time, last fall, the public works director, who has since retired, felt that it would be worthwhile now, 7-8 years into it, that it would be worth reviewing the rates, the models. Things have changed. We've added a bunch of infrastructure in that time. So, take a look at, how would that impact our impact fees, if at all. So that is ongoing. It just sort of kicked off at the end of last year. And, just to sort of mull over in your heads here, because we've asked the consultant to consider, what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we started allowing deduct meters, if you recall, for homeowners, where if they had irrigation or they were filling a pool, they could have a separate meter. They still get charged the service fee for that meter, but they wouldn't get charged the sewer portion of it. It was just for, like I say, irrigation typically. We have not allowed that for commercial and industrial users. And the question has come up because we've done some studying locally, and a couple of other communities on the seacoast and then a private water company have indicated in some cases that lawn sprinklering alone can add like 50% onto your usage. during the summer months. Obviously, that wasn't as big a deal. Well, you would hope last summer because we had a water ban because of the drought, and we were able to keep our water usage in reasonable control. But the point is that if this gets to be more, with new construction in town, the uses of water for irrigation may get a lot higher. We are looking into other sources of water, but in the short term, those aren't going to be, on board for another few years.
Once again, that doesn't put extra load on the sewer, the irrigation.
It doesn't. But it does put a load on the water source capacity. So
Separate meter, right?
yes, well, in some cases, but a
That's
lot
what
of
they do in other towns.
right. Not everybody has a deduct meter,
Yeah.
either because they don't want to pay the double service charge, or
Yeah.
they just don't feel like they use enough irrigation water. The point is, that we will be asked to consider. Do we want to have a separate set of rates for these, for the deduct meters, or adjust? If you recall, we have 3 tiers. We adjusted the tier rate on the residential portion down a few thousand gallons in 2015, 2016, in order to basically cut the residents a little bit of slack, because they don't have, with rising water rates and sewer rates, they don't have a mechanism for recovering that money. Commercial and industrial operations, in theory, do. So we may be looking at something similar to that. So there's nothing we can do about, or we will be doing it right now. The analysis is still in process, but in April or May, we'll be looking into that. So just as a consideration. And the next item is we're doing we're in the middle of a groundwater source study that we started 2 years ago. Actually, we started 4 years ago with some introductory analysis on where relatively high yield groundwater may be. Right now, we use a series of 3 wells, primarily groundwater wells, for our groundwater plant that was built in 2015. Larry Lane Stadium well, and then one at Gilman Park, and there are small facilities associated with each of those. They all tie into the Larry Lane area, and that's where the treatment plant is. In 2021, the town approved $1 million to do some advanced permitting and well analysis in town, which we've spent a portion of that to date, and the plan is in 2023 to continue work on our preferred site down off of Drinkwater Road to do more pump analysis and things like that. So the thing that I would, this sort of goes through the history for your edification. Ultimately, it's around a $6 million project once the well is
like 7 million.
deemed. 7 million, sorry.
It's all right.
7 million. Yeah, 6 million. The 6 million additional from the million we've already approved.
Right.
There is a $500,000 warrant on the 23 warrant that would basically cover if we finish the pump production work in 23. As you know, we vote in March, but the fiscal year ends in December. So there's always this like 2.5 month period when if you're out of budget, you have no mechanism for getting more budget. And if we get our permitting and everything in line by this fall, the 500,000 is basically a stopgap in case that happens, and we can continue engineering efforts until the vote in 2024.
So that warrant, that $500,000 warrant article is on the ballot.
That's on the ballot this year. I think it's number maybe 6 or 7, Article 6 or 7.
I haven't looked at the ballot this year. So.
But again, so out of the $1 million so far, we've spent slightly less than $200,000. there'll be about 700 to 750,000 out of that million that will be used for pump tests and some preliminary engineering analysis on how to tie in that well with the Larry Lane treatment facility. And then the 500,000, if approved, would go towards any advanced engineering to, because there's also work that would need to be done to the Larry Lane facility if we added, upwards of 500,000 to 1 million gallons a day, coming in. So, and then presumably in 2024, there'd be a warrant article for, somewhere around 5.5 million.
So the location of the well has been determined, the new well?
The general area has been determined. Okay. It's down off of Drinkwater Road. There were 2 fields of interest, one to the east of Drinkwater Road, one to the west on private property. And so then this next step, this production well, is to go in, sort of see where the lay of the land is. There's wetlands down there, so we have to, sort of do preliminary engineering, staying out of the wetlands, and then deal with the homeowners or the landowners on where exactly, that would be located.
So they are being involved in this, the
yes,
owners?
Exactly.
It's not PEA property?
There's a portion of it on PEA, yes. So we've been talking to them, but they obviously, Stadium Well is obviously on PEA, so we've got, so there's precedent for, working with them. They obviously use a lot of water in town, so we have a very nice relationship with them. I just wanted to pass this along for people, to get up to speed. There will probably be some preliminary information on the exact location, some of the well pump production issue, maybe in the middle of the summer. So once we get that information, we'll share it here in this committee and see how we want to go.
Has there ever been any kind of feasibility done for expanding surface water in any way?
Well, there has. In CDM, where Ben works, you didn't work on that, did you? Or did you? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in 2005. 2004, we did an analysis on expanding the surface water plant. And it went to the ballot twice and was voted down both times. And that issue, what sort of Monday morning quarterbacking, was that the analysis, and everyone, and I was on the committee at that time, so I'm certainly responsible for this, is that we looked at a whole town build out for the expansion of the surface water plant. Right now, the surface water plant has around 1 million gallon average daily capacity. With the town growth and projected growth and all of that, we thought that we needed a 3 million gallon per day plant, which would include some industrial expansion out Epping Road, and then also the whole northwestern part of Exeter, potentially being under. Upon reflection, especially after the votes, and that's why I say the Monday morning quarterbacking, it was determined that in all probability we would not be running utilities out to northwest Exeter. In all probability.
Right.
There's a highway crossing and all of that other stuff.
Right.
So the short answer is that we need to reassess that. The study is now coming up on 20 years old. The surface water plant does need work to it, but there aren't a lot of additional sources nearby the surface water plant. You can only, especially with the dam out, we can only get so much off the river anyway. So that is probably tapped out. All we would be doing is potentially building new facilities, but we wouldn't be adding capacity, which is why we're looking at groundwater.
Was there going to be an assessment done of the existing plant for a good improvements plan? Was that done? Or?
Yes, there's let's say, a low-key effort right now to dust off that old report and do some internal analysis on what could be done. And we have actually, the town has been doing, they upgraded the clear well a few years ago, and they've replaced a lot of pumps and things like that. So the plant is, for a 70-year-old plant, is actually working pretty well. But obviously, the facility is outdated. It's located in a floodplain. It doesn't really have raw water settling capabilities. There's a very small lagoon there for settling out solids from the raw or from the backwash water. So there needs to be something done, and that will probably be over the next several years. I'm thinking about 5 years or so from now.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, has the town thought about abandoning that at some point? Clearly we're continuing to develop the groundwater.
Yeah, the new plan was, we looked at a couple of different options. One up off of Holland Way. This was again in 2005, up off of Holland Way, looking at where the existing gun club is, and that area more on the backside of the reservoir as opposed to the front side. So presumably those sites would be dusted off.
For groundwater sources?
No, for surface water.
Oh, yeah.
For surface water. Yeah, groundwater has been pretty extensive. That was the money from like 4 or 5 years ago where we looked at the efficacy of various areas in town. There again was an initial analysis done back in the 2000s that helped get to the point of actually putting the plant in place in 2015. And then this additional wells, when the stadium well did not perform as hoped, it was projected at about 700,000 gallons a day, and it's more like a half. So you add that to to Gilman Park and.
Oh, you mean 500,000, not half a gallon?
Half a million. We're at like we're right around 1, maybe a little less than 1. So between the two sources maxed out, we're at about 2 million gallons a day, probably a little less. And with growth in the town and things like that, we'd like to have a little bit more. So that's where we are on that. Just wanted to give the committee a little heads up on that. We will be discussing that over the next few months. So any other questions on any of the finance or operational stuff?
No.
Okay. I'll be setting another meeting probably in April.
That's what I wanted to tell you. It's fine if it's early in April, but I'm going to be leaving the country on the 20th of April. So.
20. Okay, so before April.
Actually, maybe before April 19th, because I'm not sure.
Right.
I'll be going to Europe, so I don't know if
Cool.
those overnight flights.
That makes sense.
I'm going to Europe on the 14th of March.
Okay.
I'm going home on the 14th of March. I'm going to Ireland on the 14th of March.
Nice.
For a week, just for a week. Quick visit.
Okay.
I'm not going to Europe.
I was just going to ask you. You can come with me.
I'd like to go to Europe.
I will be going in April. So we will schedule the meeting. I'll get in touch with everyone. Thank you, Molly, for zooming in. Appreciate it. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Bye.
I don't think we don't need a roll call on adjournment, do we?
Okay.
No, so we will adjourn till April sometime. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.